introduce John Monahan. John is the Executive Director of the ONeill Institute for National and Global Health Law. He came to us from the Casey Foundation, and he has very kindly offered to be the rapporteur for our section and close us down. Thank you.
It's a hard task. It's been such a rich and robust discussion all morning, but let me do a couple housekeeping things first. I do want to say that we really appreciate, on behalf of the ONeill Institute, all of you who are able to join us today. This is just the kind of forum that Georgetown wanted the ONeill Institute to help host. We are delighted with our partnership with the Fogarty International Center. It's just been terrific. Second is, and this is something everyone in this room knows, these events don't happen by accident. These events also don't happen by all the people that you're going to hear speaking today. So I do want to take a moment to thank Ann Puderbaugh, Karen Hoffman, and Nalini Anand with the Fogarty International Center, who were really at the beginning and have followed this project all the way through, plus Jeannie Austin, who's a fellow with the ONeill Institute, and Jessica Raper and Meg McWhorter of the President's Office at Georgetown, who really helped pull all these pieces together. So thank you. That's exactly right. Let me say a couple things just in reaction to what I heard today. I mean, I think first thing is the two host institutions, I think with their leaders, actually set up a very nice common ground at the beginning, which I think speaks to the reason why this conference and this symposium made sense. They both are obviously committed in different ways to research and teaching, and it was very interesting to hear them talk about that. But I also thought to hear both Roger and Jack DeGioia talk about the focus of on the ground, where this work meets real people, as being an animating force for what drives their interest in research and training. And so let me, at the risk of wild oversimplification, suggest there are three takeaways that I would suggest for the group. First is I think that all panelists, but particularly the first panel, really chewed on what is global health diplomacy, what is its dimensions, and how did it work. And I think we heard that really, I think everyone said in different ways that this was the global health diplomacy understandably mixed health and science considerations in economic security, economics, and the other dimensions of diplomacy. And this is hardly new. As Dr. Kim pointed out, this is from the beginning of global health issues. These issues have been intertwined, and as Jimmy Coker pointed out, they remain in day-to-day work of a diplomat intimately intertwined. So it's not. There's no point in trying to separate. There's no point in. There's a point of just realizing that they're mixed together. But I think for the purpose of this discussion, a couple key things. One is. It's a question of who's at the table. We heard Dr. Zahoni talk, I think, quite powerfully about the need and the value for local capacity to engage in diplomacy as well as science. Two, to appreciate, as several people said, the role of civil society, even the undiplomatic role of activists have played critically in these set of issues. And three, as Derek pointed out, the critical role of the private sector. I mean, I think all of these pieces are part of what is global health diplomacy. I think it's a rich definition. It's broad. It has lots of stakeholders. But I think that was an unmistakable message from all the panelists for today. Two is I thought that in terms of thinking about what the highest priority is going forward, there was a common theme of, again, focusing on the ground where real people meet. I think Dr. Kim talked about how the third D of the Gates Foundation, not just discovery and development, but delivery. What's the science? What's the systems engineering? What are all the different components that make programs work on the ground? And this came up over and over again in my notes. I think, though, there were probably three sub-issues in this area that came out that I think are relevant. One is, if you're focusing on the ground, one is how effective is aid? We heard conversations in various ways. My colleague Larry Gaston talked about it in a number of ways. How is aid effective? How do we measure that? Two, how do you integrate health and non-health issues? There are a lot of discussion about the question of agricultural subsidies or intellectual property interests. How do you mix? How do you consider the role of health as part of these other economic and diplomatic interests that are out there. And then a third issue is, how do you think about education, or as one questioner raised, how do you think about the agricultural extension service equivalent here? How do you go from, as Dr. Glass would say, the gap between knowing and doing? How do you think about that piece, that dimension of it? So in my mind, that's the second piece of the priority here was on the ground. And those are at least three issues that jumped out to me. And then finally, I think everybody here had an action agenda. I think Professor Gostin did a terrific job of stating clearly the case for why it is in America's interest to care about global health, and listing 10 things that I'm sure President Obama will be getting to work on right away. A second thing is I thought Gaudenz laid out a very interesting, practical, real-world opportunity to move from the complexity and the duplication and the lack of coordination that often characterizes global health issues to at least a mechanism to move forward. And then finally, I thought Derek Yak put on the table a really complicated but important set of issues. What does it mean? What do we think about solutions when everybody's at the table? When the private sector with its expertise and delivery systems is in the mix, how does that work? So anyway, I came away thinking that there's an action agenda. So just to summarize, one is I thought there was a great discussion about what does global health diplomacy mean. We heard over and over the priority is on the ground. And third, we had some really concrete ideas about what could be the next steps in that action agenda. And I think unless anybody else has, we promised to get everybody out. But I guess the other thing I said, and I mean this in I think there was a profound optimism underlying every person who spoke today about the possibilities here. And again, I mean this in the most nonpartisan way possible, but I think there was a yes, we can sense that there is a lot to do, and everybody here was talking about their possibilities as opposed to the barriers. And I think that hopefully speaks well for what could come from here. So on behalf of the ONeill Institute, Georgetown, our partners with the Fogarty Center, I can't thank you enough for being here, and thank all of our panelists for such an incredible day. So thank you.
Thank you.